In the aftermath of the Second World War, the world stood in ruins. Cities reduced to ashes, millions of lives lost, and humanity questioning how such darkness could ever have taken hold. Yet, amid this devastation, one of the most important moments in modern history began to take shape. It started not with armies or weapons, but with judges, lawyers, and a promise. A promise that those responsible for unimaginable crimes would finally face justice. The Nuremberg Trials, held between November 1945 and October 1946, were not merely about punishment. They were about defining morality in a world that had lost its conscience. For the first time in history, leaders of a defeated nation, Nazi Germany, were brought before an international court to answer for crimes against peace, crimes of war, and crimes against humanity. This wasn't just a legal event. It was a statement to the world that no man, no matter how powerful, could commit atrocities without consequence. The decision to hold these trials in Nuremberg, a city once filled with Nazi rallies, was deeply symbolic. From the same stage where Hitler once shouted promises of eternal empire, the world now declared justice would prevail. The courtroom was filled with tension. 24 of the highest-ranking Nazi officials sat behind glass, accused of orchestrating one of the greatest genocides in history. Among them were Hermann Göring, Hitler's right-hand man, Rudolf Hess, the deputy Führer, Joachim von Ribbentrop, the foreign minister, and many others who once held absolute power over life and death. The prosecutors represented the Allied powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union, a rare moment of unity among former wartime allies. Their task was monumental: to prove, beyond any doubt, that the Nazi regime systematically murdered millions, waged aggressive war, and violated every principle of humanity. What made Nuremberg revolutionary was its approach. Never before had the concept of individual responsibility been applied to state leaders. Until then, wars were fought between nations, and victors decided the fate of the defeated. But Nuremberg introduced a radical idea: that individuals, not just nations, could be guilty of crimes under international law. The evidence presented was overwhelming. Films of concentration camps, testimonies from survivors, and mountains of Nazi documents revealed the horrifying truth. The world was forced to look at what it had allowed to happen: the mass extermination of 6 million Jews, the persecution of minorities, and the ruthless invasion of peaceful countries. The Nuremberg Trials did more than expose the crimes of the Third Reich. They redefined the meaning of justice. They became a moral compass for the post-war world, giving birth to new principles that still guide international law today. From these trials emerged the idea of crimes against humanity, the foundation of modern human rights, and eventually the establishment of the International Criminal Court. But perhaps the most powerful lesson from Nuremberg wasn't legal. It was human. It reminded the world that evil thrives when good people remain silent. And as Justice Robert Jackson, the lead American prosecutor, said in his opening statement, "The record on which we judge these defendants today is the record on which history will judge us tomorrow." This was more than a trial. It was the birth of accountability and a warning that the horrors of the past must never be forgotten. As the Nuremberg trials drew closer to their conclusion, the eyes of the world turned to the courtroom once again. Months of testimony, thousands of documents, and countless hours of footage had been presented. Now, it was time for judgment, not just of men,
but of an entire ideology that had drenched Europe in blood. On October 1st, 1946, the verdicts were read out. 22 of Nazi Germany's most powerful figures stood before the tribunal. Among them were Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and Albert Speer. Each man represented a different pillar of the Nazi system: the military, the government, the propaganda machine. The sentences varied, but the symbolism was unmistakable. 12 men were sentenced to death by hanging. 3 received life imprisonment. 4 were given shorter sentences, and 3 were acquitted. For many observers, it was a day of vindication, a moment when the victims finally had a voice and justice was delivered. But not everyone agreed. Even as the gavel struck, questions arose. Was this true justice, or was it victors' justice? Could the Allied powers, themselves not free from wartime crimes, truly claim moral superiority? Critics pointed out that the Soviet Union, one of the main prosecutors, had itself invaded Poland and committed atrocities across Eastern Europe. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States also raised ethical debates. If the Nuremberg Trials were to establish a universal principle of accountability, then who would judge the victors? Yet despite these controversies, the trials introduced something revolutionary: the idea that individuals, not just nations, could be held responsible for war crimes. It was no longer enough to say, "I was following orders." The Nuremberg Principles declared that morality stands above command, and that every soldier, every leader, must answer to humanity itself. The judge's words were powerful. Crimes against humanity are not acts of states, they are acts of men, and men must be held accountable. Those words would echo through decades of international law, inspiring the creation of future tribunals in Rwanda, Yugoslavia, and eventually the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Still, the sense of moral tension lingered. Göring managed to cheat justice by taking his own life hours before his scheduled execution. Others, like Speer, who had overseen Germany's war production, showed remorse and received lighter sentences. The world watched as their fates unfolded, each outcome sparking debate. Were the punishments fair? Were some men scapegoats while others escaped? For the survivors, however, these questions mattered less than the act of recognition itself. Finally, their suffering had been acknowledged, officially, globally, and eternally. For years they had lived with silence, shame, and disbelief. Now the world had listened, and the verdicts were not just for the accused, they were a warning for the future. As the sentences were carried out, the mood in Nuremberg was not celebratory. There was no joy in watching men hang for their crimes. Instead, there was a somber understanding that even justice cannot undo the past. One American reporter wrote, "It felt less like victory and more like mourning. Mourning for what humanity had become." The Nuremberg trials were a mirror, reflecting both the capacity for evil and the desperate need for accountability. They forced the world to confront an uncomfortable truth: that law without morality is powerless, and morality without law is blind. In that courtroom, as history closed one of its darkest chapters, the world took a cautious step toward a more just future, a future still haunted by the question, will we ever truly learn?
The Nuremberg trials didn't just punish individuals, they reshaped the very foundation of modern justice. Before 1945, there was no clear legal framework for holding leaders personally accountable for war crimes. Wars had always ended with treaties, not trials. But in Nuremberg, that changed forever. For the first time in history, international law was rewritten to say that no one is above justice. Not presidents, not generals, not even heads of state. Humanity itself became the highest court. This idea, born out of the ashes of World War II, set the stage for what would later become the United Nations' most important legal tool, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Adopted in 1948, it carried the moral weight of Nuremberg's lessons that human dignity, freedom, and justice are universal, not national privileges. In the decades that followed, Nuremberg's influence spread across the globe. The trials established 4 key principles that would change how we understand international law today. First, crimes against humanity, acts like genocide, torture, and mass enslavement, could never be justified even during war. Second, just following orders was no longer a valid defense. Every individual is responsible for their own actions, no matter what uniform they wear. Third, aggressive war itself was declared a crime, a bold statement that reshaped geopolitics forever. And fourth, those who commit these crimes can be tried by an international body beyond the borders of their own nations. These ideas sounded radical in 1946, but they would go on to inspire generations of lawyers, activists, and world leaders. When dictators later fell in Chile, Rwanda, Serbia, and Iraq, the echoes of Nuremberg could be heard in every courtroom. The message was clear: the world will not forget, and the world will not forgive impunity. Yet this legacy came at a cost. The same principles that Nuremberg introduced also forced nations to look inward. If leaders could be held accountable for war crimes, then what about the world's superpowers? Could the same standard apply to them? This moral dilemma still shapes international politics today. When powerful nations act beyond international law, critics often invoke Nuremberg, asking, have we learned nothing? From the Vietnam War to Iraq, from Syria to Gaza, the question remains painfully relevant. In 2002, the creation of the International Criminal Court at The Hague, ICC, was seen as a modern extension of Nuremberg's spirit. It promised to hold anyone, anywhere accountable for crimes against humanity. But even now, the ICC faces resistance. Some of the world's most powerful countries, including the United States, Russia, and China, have refused to fully recognize its authority. Why? Because the same nations that once preached justice fear that justice might one day come for them. Still, the idea that Nuremberg introduced, that truth and accountability are global, has never died. It lives on in every journalist who exposes war crimes, in every survivor who dares to testify, and in every courtroom where human rights are defended. The trials didn't just punish evil, they gave humanity a blueprint for justice. As one of the chief prosecutors, Benjamin Ferencz, famously said decades later, "Law, not war, must be the rule of the future. If we do not learn from Nuremberg, we will destroy ourselves." Nuremberg's message was not only about the past, it was a warning to the future, a reminder that every generation must fight not only for peace, but for the truth itself.
Nearly 80 years have passed since the Nuremberg Trials, and yet, as we look around the world today, one haunting truth remains. The lessons we vowed never to forget are being forgotten once again. The idea of never again was meant to be more than a slogan. It was a moral contract, a promise. Nearly 80 years have passed since the Nuremberg Trials, and yet, as we look around the world today, one haunting truth remains. The lessons we vowed never to forget are being forgotten once again. The idea of never again was meant to be more than a slogan. It was a moral contract, a promise from humanity to itself. But the same patterns of hatred, propaganda, and unchecked power that led to World War II still echo in our time. Look at modern conflicts, from the ethnic cleansing in Bosnia to the genocide in Rwanda, to the ongoing humanitarian crises in Syria and Gaza.
Each began with the same dangerous ingredients: dehumanization, silence, and political denial. In Rwanda, 1 million people were slaughtered in just 100 days, while the world watched and debated. In Bosnia, mass graves were uncovered decades later, filled with innocent civilians who had trusted the world to protect them. These tragedies are grim reminders that memory alone is not enough. The spirit of Nuremberg demands action, courage, and accountability, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's inconvenient. Historians warn that the seeds of atrocity are sown in the smallest acts of apathy, when people stop questioning authority, when media becomes a mouthpiece for power, when the truth becomes negotiable. That's when history begins to repeat itself. The Nuremberg prosecutors understood this well. They fought not just for punishment, but for prevention. They knew that the next great crime would not begin in a battlefield, but in the minds of ordinary people persuaded to hate. Today, propaganda spreads faster than ever, not through radio or leaflets, but through screens in our hands. Lies can travel the world in seconds, and truth struggles to catch up. Social media has become a new battlefield where disinformation shapes public opinion, fuels division, and sometimes even sparks real violence. When you think about it, the Nuremberg message that truth must stand above all is more relevant now than it was in 1946. Back then, humanity confronted lies after millions were dead. Today, we face those lies in real time, yet still fail to stop them. The danger is not just in forgetting history, it's in believing that it can't happen again. Every time we allow a war crime to go unpunished, every time a dictator silences his critics, every time a powerful nation violates international law without consequence, we chip away at the legacy of Nuremberg. The same excuses are being recycled. We didn't know. We were following orders. It's not our problem. But the prosecutors of Nuremberg already answered those excuses nearly 8 decades ago. They declared that silence makes you complicit, and obedience does not erase guilt. The world promised that Nuremberg would be a turning point, a moral awakening. But if that promise fades, then the trials become nothing more than a museum exhibit, a story of justice once achieved but no longer believed in. The question we must ask today is simple but urgent. Have we truly learned, or have we simply memorized the lesson and moved on? Because if history has shown us anything, it's that evil never disappears. It waits for our forgetfulness. The Nuremberg Trials gave us the map to a better world, but it is up to us, every generation, to follow it, or to watch that map burn in the fire of our own neglect.
The Nuremberg Trials changed the world forever. They proved that even in the aftermath of unimaginable evil, justice could prevail. The principles established here, that no leader is above the law, and that following orders is no excuse, became the foundation for modern international justice. The International Criminal Court, established decades later, owes its existence to the precedent set in Nuremberg. But more than laws, Nuremberg left behind a message, a warning, that humanity must remember. If history is forgotten, the same horrors may return. That's why the Nuremberg Trials are not just a chapter in history. They are a lesson for all time. In the years after Nuremberg, the world vowed never again. But the truth is, history has tested that promise many times. From genocides in Rwanda and Bosnia to modern conflicts where civilians still pay the highest price, the lessons of Nuremberg echo.
sometimes ignored, sometimes remembered. Each generation must decide, will we stand for justice or repeat the same mistakes? The courage of those who stood in that courtroom, judges, prosecutors, witnesses, showed that truth can survive even in the darkest of times. Their work was not just about punishing the guilty, but about protecting the future. Because justice is not only about the past, it's about the world we choose to build. So as we look back, let us also look forward. Let us remember the words engraved in history's conscience. This history must not be forgotten. And let that memory guide us every time humanity stands at the edge between justice and silence.
You're watching AlertNow News, bringing you clear, fast, and reliable updates from the world of politics, economy, business, and technology. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more global insights right here where facts meet clarity.